Okay, we're going live. Ooh, so I've been putting off having this conversation because I am very uncomfortable with it. I recently attended a week-long sexual alchemy, Daoist sexual alchemy class with Mantak Chia. And it just so happens that my aunt had recently moved to Madrid, my aunt and uncle, and were asking me to come visit. And I was considering Mantak Chia's trainings mostly for my scar work, for post-op genital scar care. But that's a several week-long training in Thailand. It's very pricey. It would take a lot of time in the middle of Montreal summer. I didn't want to do that, and also I was curious about the training. So when I saw he was doing a week-long training on Daoist Sexual Alchemy, I was like, oh, I can use that in my practice too, and then I can like feel out his offerings and how willing and open he is to working with bodies like this before I make a bigger commitment. And it was awful, y'all. It was awful. 10 out of 10 do not recommend. Absolutely. Lessons learned. And I want to talk a little bit about it because I want to talk a lot about it, actually, because a lot of lessons were learned. I went understanding that this was a very male-female binary class. And I went with the intention to translate for myself, for the sake of my clients, for the sake of my community. And I got to do a lot of that work. I spent a lot of time doing that work. So I deeply, deeply resonate with teachings of Taoism. I have for many years, and have folded much of those understandings, those Eastern philosophy understandings, into my own ways of being in the world. It speaks to me on multiple fronts. One is just that there's no good or bad in Taoism, whereas like Buddhism says, follow the way of the Buddha. Taoism says there is no way. There is no way. The way is to go. It's to be. And for me, that's always been a reminder to simply stay with what is present. When we work with what is present, then things just work out. So I felt like this training really showcased that. And Mantak said it many times, like there is no good and bad. There's only kind of a balance, and you have to trust in that. You're not trying to fix things because that's impossible. You can't do that. But you can keep yourself in balance. And if more of us keep ourselves in balance, more of the world is in balance. And just trust that things will kind of even themselves out. There is no utopia to be found. There is only reality. And I find reassurance in that, given this world that we live in. So, a couple of things, like first thing I noticed was just zero mention of trauma, zero, nothing, riddled with just typical normative bullshit. I expected that. That was fine. It's embedded in so-called sacred sexuality or sex positivity, like in the cis-het world. That's just a thing. That's fine. That's most of the world. I'm glad people find their ways to engaging in conscious sexuality, period. Great. That's a beautiful alternative to most of what we see. His offerings are deeply mixed with both, well, I would say not just Eastern philosophies of Taoism, but also traditional Chinese medicine. He's Chinese. but lives in Thailand. And Eastern medicine to some degree, but ooh, man, not citing sources. Oh, it's mine to hold. I get very uncomfortable with that. Also citing research that it's just clearly obviously flawed as fuck. It's hard for me to look at and then watch people take that as gospel. So it was complex. It was very complex. There was so much puritanical Christian doctrine throughout the whole week. And I was like, oh my fuck me. I left the US South to get away from this. And I've done a pretty damn good job considering that it's threaded throughout Turtle Island because of colonization. But to come into this space, I've been in so many diverse, different types of sacred sexuality, sex positive spaces and teachings. And I think this was the most Christian one I'd ever been in. I was like, oh, this is a surprise, like don my armor. Ooh, okay. How do I just let things float by, and not allow them to penetrate? So, yeah, his offerings were riddled with whorephobia and sexism as fuck. Holy shit balls. Super anti-menopausal, definitely falls into the like Eastern or Western rhetoric of you've hit menopause, you are now flawed. If you are not able to procreate and are young and nubile, then you are flawed. You are no longer of use. Good luck in the world. It's really hard to watch older women in that space kind of like nodding their heads and also being confused and trying to ask questions and being kind of shot down. And I just happened to be reading Sharon Blackie's Haggitude throughout that week and was really feeling a lot of heart alignment with the menopausal, postmenopausal women in the room as somebody whose breasts are not trying to create milk and whose body is not trying to produce eggs. So that was interesting just on a personal level. I mean, there were things like he's super pro sex ed for children, except then he turns around and like blames parents for a 9-year-old getting pregnant. And I was like, what are you fucking talking about, man? Like, that's pedophilia. that's not a lack of sex education. Like, I mean, it is okay, but that's not what he was saying. Not in that way. He wasn't allowing for nuance in that way. And so I was trying to hold tenderly this reality of different culture and also, no, 9, nope, nope. I'm not talking about a teenager. We're talking about a 9-year-old. So anyway, that was, oof, I feel that in my body still. And then there were these, as I said, the Taoism, like he really modeled that throughout the week because he would offer one thing and then kind of balance it in the next breath, saying that women are more sexually powerful than men, but then turns around and says women who use vibrators are lazy. It's straight up, that's almost verbatim. Things like this. I was like, oh, this is okay. How do I make sure to take the baby out of the bathwater? And also, maybe I want to throw a little bit of the baby out. I don't, this is questionable. At one point, somebody asked Mantak Chia, about vasectomies. They asked about vasectomies. Like, do you believe this increases or decreases man's sexual energy? And he thought that the person said sodomy, not vasectomy, and immediately launched into sodomy is the ultimate sin. You will go to hell. And I was like, oh, shit. What did... I gotta go, y'all. I literally packed my bag and was like, I'm done now. And that happened to be the last day. And I'm glad for it because I got through the week, but holy fuck balls. Like, whew. Yeah, of course, like that's mine to a degree. I lost my entire life and understanding and connection to place and people after coming out for dating a woman. And ironically, I'd had anal sex before that point, but that doesn't matter. Not the point. Regardless, there's a deep cultural embodied pain and understanding in that, having grown up in the U.S. South and Christian indoctrination, and then to hear that in this space that was about, sacred sexuality as a philosophy, not as doctrine and dogma. And I was like, where the fuck am I right now? So I want to take the lessons of what Mantak Chia offered with appreciation of the lineage of TCM and 5,000 plus years of Daoist knowledge. And I certainly don't want to appropriate that information. That was part of why I wanted to go to the source, to go to see his teachings, and not just see a white practitioner that had worked with him, because thankfully I have the privilege of access to be able to make that choice. Man, I wish I'd made a different choice though. So I'm thinking a lot about like appropriation versus appreciation versus evolution, like in the understandings of Taoism, that there is no good or bad, there is no right or wrong, and trusting in balance and trusting that things will become as they need in order to remain balanced. I really walked away with the like, this has got to evolve to remain balanced in order for us to stay with what is the reality of changing sexuality, and the ways in which we can recognize that Christianity is fucked shit up, not to mention so many other pieces. I'm not going to go too far down that road, but it was a deep struggle to be in so-called sacred sexuality space with dogma around, negative dogma around homophobia, and oh my fuck, I can't even with the sexism, y'all. It was so deep. Woo! I do not suffer that well in the world to begin with, and then to be in that kind of space and having it just throughout the whole week was pretty much a challenge. As I said, like, there was no mention of trauma. How do you do a week of sexuality and not use the word trauma? That I mean, even in cis straight spaces, I was like, what is happening right now? I felt like I was in a time warp. Woo! Yeah. So I there was a moment where we broke into, as I said, I knew that this was going to be deeply male-female, and I was prepared for that. That piece didn't bother me. But there was a moment where we broke into groups of men and women, and the women were going to do breast massage, and the men were going to do cock massage. I have neither of these things anatomically. So I knew the choice I was going to make, but I wanted to kind of try to open a conversation and, get thoughts or insights or opinions from Mantak Chia. So I asked him, I said, I look like this, but I was actually, and still have, born with and have a vulva. So what is your recommendation for which room I proceed to? And he laughed nervously, which my understanding is that's cultural, and said, "Oh, you look like a man, but you choose," and walked away. I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna choose," and I'm definitely going with the women. Like, I feel more affinity for my breastless chest than I do for my clit as a cock. So, choices, great. I get to decide. So that's nice. So I went into the women's room. I've recounted this before, but I'll say it again. And it was the Mantak Chia spoke in English throughout the training the week. but everything else was in Spanish. And so in the circle, I had asked folks, like, or asked somebody, could you please translate for me? And a woman translated for me, and I had said, like, this is, like, I was born a woman, and I've taken my breasts off, and I understand I look like this. I still feel an ethos and understanding in my body of womanhood. So I am in this space. And this is my first time in a women's sexuality circle since coming out of pandemic and having facial hair and physical body changes due to testosterone. And that got translated into, this is her first women's circle. So I got to do trans femme work in the world. I'm happy, whatever. So it's nice to know that that space felt safe enough and comfortable enough. That's relative, right? That's relative, but it was comfortable enough for me, even though, some women were like, yeah, whatever. And some women were like, I don't know about this, but okay, fine, I'll take it. Yeah. So as a group in Madrid, like that felt nice enough. But as I said, the training itself was just listening to him repeatedly tell women that were menopausal or postmenopausal that they just were not worthy of the attention of care was shocking to me. It was hard to hear, and there wasn't a lot of space for dialogue. And that is not the space in which I am built to do political work, I gotta say. Not yet, not in this new body. I think that with some time and some practice and some resiliency, which I'm giving myself, I'm gonna get there, but this feels too fresh and too new for me, and that space was as well. So, and then language barriers on top of it, and so, but part of my voicing this right here is preparing for future, because I'm going to keep showing up in spaces where I quote unquote don't belong and nobody has a fucking clue what's going on here. So I'm going to figure out how to do that. But yeah, so I'm sad. I have heartbreak, as Lama Rod Owens would say, like under your rage is heartbreak. And I'm like, yes, sir. Yep, heartbreak. And also, as I said, appreciation for Taoist philosophy being not about good or bad or right or wrong. I love that. And when I try to explain Taoism really quickly to folks, I'm like, first of all, like, you could read the Tao Pu. It's not actually Taoist text, but it's a sweet little, like, here's an elementary intro that is darling to Taoism. So if you kind of want to listen to a white dude utilize the world of Winnie the Pooh to explain Taoist philosophy, that's complicated in and of itself. But if you want to do that, it's pretty sweet story, darling. And there's also a bazillion, I think, very interesting texts out there about Taoism. But a story I like to use, just to be quick about it, is, and I think I actually heard this during a Buddhist retreat, Buddhist mindfulness retreat. But let's say a farmer's cow disappears. Farmer's cow leaves. Uh-oh. And the neighbors are like, oh no, that's awful. And he's like, is it? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And then the cow shows up and he has another cow in tow. And the neighbors are like, whoa, that's awesome. Well done. You've like doubled your cows. And he's like, now I have to feed 2 cows. Is it? I don't know. And then his son gets kicked by one of the cows. And the neighbors are like, oh no, your son broke his leg being kicked by a cow. That's awful. And he's like, is it? I mean, maybe there's a reason here. Well, not reason, because there isn't reason, but he's just like, meh, neither good nor bad. And then the government comes and they're like, oh, we're taking all the young men to go to war. And the neighbors are like, oh my God, that worked out. Like, they're not taking your son because he has a broken leg. And he's like, Is that good or bad? So I like this tiny little snippet of an illustration, just to say, like, the practice of being just simply present with what is and not judging it, right? That's what that boils down to. That's much of what called me to Mantak Chia's practice. Isn't necessarily his work, but it is the philosophy on which it is grounded, which I deeply appreciate and have found much support in my life in being able to be present with what is and trying not to decide or judge, but simply be. So, unfortunately, we have the prospect of human reality coming into this. And Mantak was raised Christian, and it shows that he has not done a lot of the unlearning of that very strict dogma and negativity and hate. And I was so sad to see it show up there. So I had to do a lot of exercising, right? Because it touched upon my own harms being raised Christian as well, and the work I had to do to untangle that, the work I continue to have to do to untangle that. So, yeah. Oof. I still feel it in my body. There's like this churning, like, about all the sexism throughout the whole fucking week. Oh, I was so enraged. I tried to speak up a couple of times, and I managed several, and I didn't manage several. And I had so much like internal quaking and heat. And every time I did speak, it was just so wavering, which is fine, except that before testosterone, I would cry in those moments, which was great. Like, I didn't mind crying. I love crying. It was great because it took out the tension so that I was able to get out the words. But because I haven't had access to tears hardly, I wasn't able to cry. And so I wasn't able to get to my words. And that was just like another level of like, let me just be with what is. Like, what I need to do is tend to myself right now. What I want to do is like stand up politically and be like, the fuck, dude. And that is not the capacity I have right now. So, okay, let me practice the Taoist philosophy of being with what is. And what is I'm activated as fuck by this asshole. And also, he's not an asshole. Like, he's built of the cultures and understandings of which he comes from, just like I am. And I have my own shit that I put into the world that people are like, you asshole. And I'm like, well, I am what I am. So, fuck. And we hope that I hope that I'm able to have conversations with people that people feel like they can speak up, and we can hear those things, and we can interface and learn and change and shift and grow and compost and recycle and all the things. But I think he's 79. He's been doing this for a long time. His group is pretty insular, and I don't see that happening. So that's unfortunate. So if you are interested in his work, I wholeheartedly, deeply hope that you will find somebody who has done internal work around disarming their Christian puritanical doctrine, values, as well as being anti-racist and anti-sexist and anti-ageist and anti-ableist, because he was all of those things. He was ableist and sexist and racist, and it just, whew, it was an intense week. that was an intense week. I took the week after off and I got out of Madrid. I went over to Barcelona because I was like, I need to be in water. I need to be in sunshine. I need to be surrounded by queers. And that was helpful, but I was so out of my body after that week. After a week of training, being in our bodies, I was just completely disconnected. So I ended up, when I got home, it was like my whole body had flu symptoms for about 2 days, even though I felt just fine, but my whole body was just like, you know, like, I just felt like so much toxin. It was like, finally, I was both safe and comfortable in my home to just like turn into absolute fucking goo, and try to finish processing this week of deep heartbreak that I had just put myself through. You know, yeah. So there's a lot of things that he offered that I loved and adored, you know, and there were things that I was like, this is absolute bullshit. No, absolutely not. Me wearing a white t-shirt is not going to support my clients opening up their root chakra. I'm not gonna buy into that, and you're welcome to, and I'm not going to, because I get to decide for me, you get to decide for you. So wear your white t-shirt to help open up your root chakra. That's fine. I'm gonna do something else. I don't know, where do you want to put your energy? It's not gonna hurt, so you know, that's great. Anyway, there's just some weird shit, you know, like there was definitely cultural pieces like, oh, you know, do this or that to not get coronavirus. And I was like, not touching this with a 10-foot pole. So I'm still kind of scrubbing clean and washing through and filtering through a lot of the beautiful offerings that were there. I'm not going to, this is kind of a rant, so I'm not going to go into the awesome stuff because I'm still sussing out the goo. And I want to be able to look at all of those pieces once they're, I've kind of pulled out the gunk of the overlay of massive sexism and patriarchy, especially that. Gosh, yeah. So, but I'll come back around to it. There's pieces that I'm really looking forward to bringing into my practice, especially my post-surgical genital, transgenital pleasure massage work. Like, yeah, so we shall see. But anyway, that's my rant to please don't go do that. Do something else. There are other people that are filtering that work. Let them do that work. So that's all I got for today. So, all right. Thanks for coming by for this. Love you. Bye. See you later.